What makes a good assessment? Short answer questions. Welcome to the fifth of a series of video presentations which have been put together by Alpha Plus Consultancy with support from EEF and in partnership with the British Council and CBSE. These video presentations cover key aspects of a series of training courses which we have been delivering to teachers and CBSE staff to support end-of-class assessments that we have designed. These end-of-class assessments are for English reading, maths and science for classes 6 to 10. In this video, we will be looking at short answer questions, the command words used in these questions, and how point-based mark schemes work. So, what do we mean by a short answer question? Short answer questions are any questions that require a student to provide a response that is not a selection from a list nor an extended piece of writing. The answers range from a single word or number through to a couple of short paragraphs or a more complex set of calculations. The answers are not necessarily written in full prose and can be answered with bullet points in some cases, though for some full prose is required. But they can also include answers that require a graph to be plotted or a diagram drawn, or a list of features to be provided. Essentially, they are constrained or semi-constrained items that require students to retrieve information from their minds and use it to present their own answer to a task. In many cases, the student will need to use additional information provided in a source, which might take the form of text, a diagram or graph, a photo, or other stimulus material. Short answer questions are the most common type used for many school assessments, as they allow easy coverage of a broad range of skills, covering a breadth of content types. They are very prevalent in maths and science subjects and used for younger students in English and art subjects, though for older students extended response questions become more common, particularly in arts and languages. Short answer questions can assess a wide variety of skills, from the recall of simple facts through the application of knowledge and understanding to different scenarios presented, and then on to analysis and evaluation. They can cover all levels of Bloom's taxonomy and are very versatile, which is why they are so widely used. The number of marks for these types of questions will vary depending on the depth and breadth of the answer required by the task, but there is usually a maximum of about 6 marks, though there are exceptions to this. The answers are either constrained, such as in a single numeric answer, or semi-constrained, such as a paragraph describing a scientific feature, or explaining how a writer uses language in the text being studied. Short answer questions can include multi-step tasks, such as a complex calculation in maths or science. But care needs to be taken so that the student is not asked to complete multiple tasks in the same question. In this case, it might be better to ask 2 separate but linked short answer questions instead. The number of marks for a question is an important piece of information for the student, as this helps tell them the scale of the task expected and the breadth and/or depth of the answer that would be required. Larger tariff items will require more details in order to gain more marks, and students will use this to decide what level of information should be included in their answer. This is why the number of marks is indicated for each question in most assessments. The skills for a task are set out by the assessment objectives they address, and in order to give students a clear steer about the task they need to complete and the skills they need to show, an appropriate command word is used. We will look at command words later in this video. Short answer questions can be written to be either standalone, that is, there is no link between sequential questions in an assessment, or linked. Linked questions will follow on from each other and be based on a common theme or source. Standalone questions will enable wide coverage of the assessment domain, but they can be off-putting for students, as the topics they are answering on can be disparate and it can feel somewhat random. As standalone questions, they can be without any source material and generally test recall of knowledge and understanding, or they can have a source and assess application or other higher order skills. Standalone questions are usually numbered 1, 2, etc. to indicate they are separate and not linked together. A couple of examples of standalone short answer questions are shown. Linked questions are often based around a source or a theme. They allow a sequence of questions to be written that make logical sense and that flow so it is easier for students to engage with them. It also means that sources can be used for multiple questions, which maximizes their use and minimizes reading time. Linked short answer question sets can also include objective questions if it is appropriate to do so. Using linked questions allows the demand of the questions to be altered as the student progresses through the questions. So, the first question might be a straightforward question, applying knowledge to the source and worth 1 mark, and then this could be followed by a more demanding question, assessing higher order skills worth more marks, and so forth. This means that the weakest students will be able to engage with at least some of the questions, and the most able students will be challenged by the later question in the set of linked questions. It is worth noting that the questions do not all have to be on the same topic in a linked set. They can run across topics and allow the writer to test whether the student can make links between topics. Linked questions are usually presented as A and B and so forth, as this indicates to students that the questions all relate to the same linked set, though in some cases they are numbered 1, 2, etc. This is often the case for reading questions in languages. Either way, the approach should be consistent for the assessments you are writing for your subject. In theory, there are no limits to the number of linked questions in a linked set, but often there are 3 to 5 and normally there would be no more than 10. One critical point in linked questions is that you cannot ask the student to use their answer for an earlier question in a later one. This would mean that if the student got the first question wrong or were unable to do it at all, they would not be able to answer the second question. This is called double jeopardy and is inherently unfair. Here is an example of a linked question for English. It is for Class 7 and based on a source text. These first 3 questions ask the student to identify the number of different items from the text. These are then followed by a question which asks the student to identify a word from the text which relates to a concept. There are then 5 more questions which are not shown that ask the student for explicit and implicit meanings, and a question which is a more open response at the end, which asks the students for a personal response to the text. In this question set, the students are asked to provide simple descriptions for the first 2 questions shown, which assess application of knowledge and understanding to a relatively simple context given. The third question asks the students to provide some analysis of the experiment to identify a variable to control, and the last question asks them to evaluate a disadvantage. Note that the question numbering for Part C is subdivided into 3 further questions which relate to the variables in the experiment and are shown by lowercase Roman numerals. Command words are the words in a question which indicate the type of task, and hence the type of skill that the question is trying to assess. Vague questions which use inappropriate command words are illegitimate sources of difficulty. This can be a significant problem, so we are going to look at use of command words. They need to give a clear instruction to the candidate about what to do. The task needs to be unambiguous. The command word should link to the assessment objectives and hence the level of skill that the task requires. Command words may be very specific to subjects and may be used in different ways, as the content and skills being assessed can be very different, but they should always be used consistently within a subject. The task must be clear, as if it is not, then you'll be testing the student's ability to decode the question rather than their ability to show what they know and can do. Examples of command words include evaluate, assess, analyze, explain. These assess higher order skills and are usually more demanding questions which generally require students to provide reasons for their decisions. Describe is used when the task wants the student to demonstrate their knowledge of the features being assessed. These questions normally require a narrative. For instance, an answer which describes the details of a reading text or the features of a scientific phenomena or process. There is no requirement to provide reasons as there would be in an explain question. Answers can be a couple of short sentences through to a paragraph or 2 in length, depending on the required task. State or list are used when asking for recall knowledge, such as a definition, rule, law, name, formula, or feature. The task is usually quite constrained, and the expected answers are short responses of a single word or a single sentence. Some subjects have very specific command words, such as those used in mathematical subjects. These include calculate, plot, draw, etc., for carrying out numerical procedures, including plotting graphs, or for presenting information in different formats, such as drawing diagrams, flowcharts, etc. For most subjects, command words such as what, why, and how are not used in isolation, but are combined with other command words such as explain or describe, such as explain why or describe how. However, there is a tradition in English that these types of command words can be used on their own. So questions like, how did the writer use language to create atmosphere in the text are often set. From the context of the question, the requirement is that an explanation is required, but in many instances, weaker students are not able to give the explanation, but they may be able to offer some description for which marks can be awarded. We will look at how this works in more detail when we explore level of response mark schemes in Video 6. In Video 3, we looked at the approach of designing mark schemes where we are looking to create good or great mark schemes. These set out clearly what the acceptable and unacceptable answers are, whether by listing them or using rules. For many short answer questions, point-based mark schemes are used. These require the examiner to match aspects of the student's answer to points in the mark scheme. They are suitable for short answer questions which do not require an explanation. For questions which require an explanation, then a level or response mark scheme should be used. We will look at level of response mark schemes in Video 6 when we consider extended response questions. Mark schemes would normally show the question and then the rules for marking the question below this. The question is given for easy reference to the marker. The mark scheme is split into two columns, the first showing the answer expected and the second providing guidance on how to apply the rules. The number of marks for each part is made clear in the mark scheme, and the marker just needs to match the student's answer to the mark scheme. The number of marks are shown in brackets. When matching the answers, alternative correct answers should be shown. For example, the formula could be shown in symbols or in numerals. Also, different units should be considered as well. The guidance provides some rules for marking. The first column shows acceptable answers, and the guidance states how to award marks if no workings are shown, what to do if no units are given, and what to do if the answer is incorrect, but the formula is right. In maths, the mark schemes work a little differently. They have two types of marks. One type is the answer mark, which is given for the correct outcome of the calculation. It is indicated in the mark scheme with the prefix A. The other type of mark is a method mark, and this is for the candidate showing the correct method to answer the question, even if they do not carry out the calculation correctly. This is indicated with a prefix M. In many questions, students are not instructed to show their workings, so if they just show the correct answer, they can be awarded full marks as it is assumed they chose the correct method. If the student is told they have to show their workings and they do not do so but give a correct answer, then they would not get the method marks. If the calculation is a multi-step and the student makes a mistake in the first step, then they should not be penalized for this in the marking of the rest of the equation. Therefore, the error made should be allowed to be carried forward, and if they get later steps correct, they should be given the marks for the later steps. This is called carry-forward marking. Mark schemes are key to ensuring that assessments are valid, and we have seen how they can be used to mark most short answer questions. But for extended response questions and those short answer questions which require an explanation, then a different approach is needed. These are called level of response mark schemes, and we will look at these in Video 6.